Well, good afternoon again, and I must first start by thanking all of you for spending 2 afternoons with us at the inaugural GenZero Climate Summit. Now, I think I have been very humbled by the presence of many global thought leaders in this space. GenZero is a very young company. Just earlier this week, we celebrated our first birthday. And so we are intensely aware that we are really standing on the shoulders of giants. Thought leaders like our 2 keynote speakers this week, David, Dirk, who have actually spent many years of their lives actually trying to perfect a very, very difficult market and industry. There are also many of our portfolio companies and our fund partners who have actually very generously spent the entire week with us here. We have benefited from many of our interactions, not just among us as a GenZero ecosystem, but really with many of the others who have actually joined us in Singapore this time for Ecosperity Week. Now, right now, I think it's very, very hard, given the richness of the conversations that we have had over the past 2 days, for me to actually do justice to the content and then try to attempt to summarize. So I thought maybe rather than attempt the impossible, maybe I tell some stories and show some pictures. I think the first takeaway and observation I actually have is really that we should be thinking about data and not dogma. Now, during this 2 days or maybe even the entire Ecosperity Week, we have heard so many folks tell us about the importance of having robust science, the importance of being fact-based in the way that we approach decarbonization pathways. Even today, when we are having a debate around whether technology is better or nature is better, we still nevertheless, between Rodi, Renat and myself, actually go back to understanding facts, right? What does the data actually tell us? So this leads me to this picture about diamonds, the purest form of carbon. In fact, also like the carbon markets, a super hard nut to crack, right? But on carbon, on diamonds, right? So those of us who have actually had to buy diamonds for our partners and our loved ones, we'll realize that we actually have very objective measures of quality, right? So if you go to a jeweler, you will understand the importance of carat for the weight, color, cut, clarity, and Weiling, I don't know why I know all these things, but Now, but there is actually an industry report that prices all these dimensions of quality, right? Whether it is the color, internally flawless, D-color, triple excellent cut diamond. But that report, the Rappaport report, only got established in 1978. Now, this is people have been buying diamonds for a long, long time. But a standardized way of pricing carbon across all its different dimensions of quality came out only less than 50 years ago, right? So what this basically tells us is that it takes a while for us to have consensus around the way that we would dimensionalize quality, but we will sooner or later get there. The other importance of understanding data is that a lot of our decision-making needs to be grounded in facts. We can look at the same set of data and come to fairly different views, but we must always at least agree on the facts. So this story around the diamonds tells us that there is hope. At some point in time, we will be able to get to some consensus around the dimensions of quality, the way that we think about what makes sense for us to invest into what kinds of pathways for decarbonization. But the road to get there will be difficult, but the idea is let's not actually brush things off by thinking that, no, there are absolutely no rules. The next lesson is really around prioritizing action and not perfection. Now, normally I use a story around this cassette, which is a Betamax tape. Now, some of us may remember the time of home entertainment with VHS tapes and not Betamax because it never really got there, right? But at a point in time when there was VHS tapes, if you go to the broadcast centers and all the professionals, they do not use VHS. They use this fella, Betamax or ADAT tapes. No, but this never really scaled up, even though it is actually a technically superior solution, right? What scaled up and brought countless hours of entertainment to all of us in our homes really was a slightly technically inferior VHS tape. What is the point there? Now, normally I would say, hey, look, bear in mind, sometimes you don't end up with the perfect solution. But the imperfect solution may sometimes be good enough. We cannot let perfection get in the way of good enough, especially if we have a race against time. So we need to have a bias for action. Now, the next thing is around the idea of having some sense of agency, that it is about me and not who else. This picture shows two physicists that were instrumental in the development of atomic weapons. Now, there is this famous story about some secretive meeting between these two physicists in Copenhagen before the end of the war. I think it's sometime around 1941. It got dramatized into a movie, I think, but certainly a play called Copenhagen. And what's the moral of the story? Now, the moral story is not whether or not the historical papers told us that Heisenberg tried to influence Bohr and say, hey, look, maybe we shouldn't be recommending atomic energy. Let's just fudge this thing and say maybe it's not financially possible, it's technically difficult, and delay the development of atomic weapons, right? Now, but the way that the play and some of the dramatization of this episode, what are the lessons that we have learned is this. Actually, when we think about the atomic weapons, finally having an atomic bomb drop over Nagasaki, Hiroshima, we think that, those were decisions made by military leaders, maybe political leaders, in the development of nuclear weapons. But actually, this conversation among scientists and what they decided to recommend as possible, what is technically possible, what is the techno-economic entitlement, if you like, right, using more modern terms of understanding this, to their masters, to their military commands, to their political leadership, influenced the course of history. Scientists, right? So each of us actually, in our own way, as allocators of capital, investors, policymakers, all of us actually have agency. Because at every single level of decision making, we are making choices. And we are determining the trajectory of how decarbonization pathways will develop. So it is actually about us, me. We don't need to ask about who else, not waiting for regulations to change, incentives to be there, corporates to take action. But perspective matters. Now, before I explain this particular picture, which all of you can recognize is the planet that we live on, may I just ask all of you to do something, an activity. Now, I did this with an audience a few months ago, and I thought it was quite interesting. If I may just ask all of you to just raise your hands, and you draw a circle in a clockwise direction and look at it. Okay? Now, it's going in a clockwise direction. Bring it down, bring it down, bring it down. Do exactly the same thing and now look at it. Which direction is it moving? Counterclockwise. Action is the same. Perspectives matter. The way you can look at the same set of data, the way you look at the same situation, basically where you stand depends on where you sit sometimes. And therefore, perspectives matter. Now, this is a picture of Earth, I think probably taken from one of those lunar missions that were going to the moon. There were a few of these pictures for different missions. But is this really how we normally see the world? Not really. The way that we have often imagine the world is in the form of a map. When you're taking a plane and you're saying, where am I at right now? Where is my plane at? You're looking at the map. And the one thing that the map has that this picture does not have are boundaries, national borders, right? The real world does not actually have boundaries, okay? So one of the important things about perspective is to understand that climate change for us is actually a transnational problem, and it actually requires radical collaboration among all of us, whether it's in a private sector or between countries, to solve it, because this is actually a real picture of the world, a world without boundaries. The next thing that is actually important on perspectives is actually another picture of a planet, this time around Pluto. So when many of us, or at least when I was growing up, okay, I learned that there were 9 planets in the solar system. I understand that for a generation before me, they could have been told that there were 10. Right now, if our kids are going to school, they will learn that there are 8. Now, Pluto did not magically disappear. It's still circling around the sun, but it has been defined out of existence for being a planet. Okay? What is the lesson there? In one of my first few discussions with the team, I worry. I worry about whether or not the things that we're investing in today could be defined out of relevance tomorrow. right? But that is a risk that we have to take. The fact that actually there could be this risk should not be a reason why we fail to take action now. But we have to be conscious of this particular risk. And in our sector, in our industry, there are these definitional challenges. But let's not forget that however we define it, as long as the real world action and implications are there, impacts are there, it is worth taking a chance. So really, as I conclude, I want to be able to thank all of you for joining us on this journey, for your partnership and support in allowing us to do the work that we have done over the past 11, 12 months as GenZero. There is a certain bias for us to have to take action now because as a double bottom line investor, we are acutely aware that it's not just about making the right decisions from a financial point of view, but about being able to deliver real impact as quickly as possible. And this cannot have been done without all of you joining us on this journey. So thank you very much for your active participation, your support, and I hope to see you all again next year. Thank you.